Hello and welcome back. In this lesson, we will discuss about row and column store in HANA database. SAP HANA database supports both row and column store. That means the database of SAP HANA supports both row tables and column tables in the same database. By supporting both row and column store, SAP HANA gets the power of supporting both transactional as well as analytical applications to the optimum. An example of such a modern system is SAP S/4HANA, which combines both transactional and analytical applications and is built on SAP HANA platform. It is worth to know that for OLTP, row store is optimal, and for OLAP, column store is optimal. Here, we will explore this concept in detail and find out in which scenario row store is suitable and in which scenario column store is optimal. A key difference between row and column store is the way the data is organized, as you can visualize this from the image. Let's understand how computer stores data in its memory. It stores data in contiguous memory allocations. In this picture, we will display how data will be stored in computer memory if we follow row store and how data will be stored if we follow column store. In row store, it stores a sequence of records that contains fields of one row in the table. Whereas in column store, the entire column data is stored in contiguous memory locations. From this, we can easily figure out that if we have to retrieve entire row data, then row store will be the optimum storage technique. Thus, row store becomes optimum for transactional applications wherein we try to retrieve or update an entire record. In our example, if we want to retrieve the details of Tina, it becomes absolutely simplified with row store as the entire record is available in a linear set of memory locations. Whereas to retrieve the same set of data in column store, the system has to traverse various memory locations belonging to different columns. On the other hand, if we want to retrieve score of all the students, then row store has to traverse through memory locations of different rows. Whereas in the case of column store, retrieving this data becomes very quick. Row store is still needed to support transaction processing where all column needs to be retrieved. SAP HANA gives you the ability to make a table either row storage or column storage. You cannot have a table that is both row and column store at the same time. Based on your application and usage, you will have to decide for the table to be either row store or column store, considering the various advantages that column store has over row store. If in case required, SAP HANA gives you the feature to convert a table from row to column and vice versa without losing data. Although this might be a database intensive process. Now that we have understood how row and column storage works, let us see what are the advantages of column storage type. Column store tables are efficient for analytical applications. Usually, only limited columns are required with column store. Only the required columns are loaded in the main memory, and hence we can avoid filling up with columns that will never be used, and hence we can save memory. Also, in column store, the data is arranged efficiently with all values of columns appearing one after another. Continuous sequencing of the column values is preferred by the CPU. With column store, SAP HANA scans columns of data so quickly that additional indexes are usually not required. Column tables are optimal for parallel processing as each code is able to work on different columns. The data in the SAP HANA column store is automatically compressed. This reduces the data footprint. The downside to column store is the reconstruction of complete records from the individual column store if all columns are required by the application. These points makes column store very effective as there will be very less scenario in which you want to retrieve all the columns of a record. Row store is still needed to support transactional processing where all columns needs to be retrieved. With this, we conclude this lesson of row and column store in SAP HANA. Thanks for your attention and see you in the next lesson. If you like this video, then don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon.